All right, welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into a really fascinating mystery. Have you ever wondered why our economic system feels, well, fundamentally rigged, despite endless political debates and policy proposals? We hear about inequality all the time, right? But what if the way we're trying to fix it is completely blind to how power actually operates today? Let's get right into it.
Look at this number, 987. By the mid-2020s, the financial gain of a single household at the top 1% was 987 times larger than a household in the bottom 20%. I mean, 987 times. That's not just a wealth gap, that is an absolute chasm. And you know, when the average person feels like they're just frantically treading water while those at the top are essentially blasting off into space, a deep structural resentment really starts to boil over across society. And historically speaking, this level of inequality, it rarely ends with a polite policy update. Macro studies show that these extreme wealth peaks are almost never broken peacefully. Usually, they get shattered by one of three pretty catastrophic resets: total civil collapse, mass mobilization warfare, or total revolution. Observers from all over the political spectrum, literally including billionaires themselves, are looking at these historical patterns and feeling a very real sense of dread about what might come next. So, what's the standard panic solution to this looming doomsday scenario? Well, the most frequent answer from the top is pretty straightforward. Shift the tax structure in favor of a slightly steeper curve. Basically, just raise taxes on the rich, redistribute that wealth, and smooth everything out. It sounds incredibly logical, doesn't it? Just treat it as a math problem, move the money around, and we're good. But here's where we pull the rug out. What if taxing them misses the real problem entirely? Seriously, what if standard economic class warfare is aiming at completely the wrong target? The sources we're digging into today argue exactly that. They suggest our entire economic framework has a massive sociological blind spot. See, we keep treating this like a fluid class issue, when in reality, it's morphed into something much older, way more rigid, and frankly, completely immune to simple taxation.
To really grasp this, we've got to totally shift our paradigm. We need to contrast a class system against a caste system. A class system is economic. It's fluid. It's based on achieved status, meaning you can move up or down based on your market success. But a caste system, that is hereditary. It's rigid. It's based on ascribed status. It's determined strictly by birth, and moving up is structurally impossible. Now, our modern assumption is that we live in a fluid class system, but the data, it suggests something entirely different.
This brings us to a sociological mechanism called elite closure. Basically, this is the structural process where an upper class calcifies into an impenetrable hereditary caste fortress. It's what happens when a theoretically open achievement-based economy slowly hardens into a closed loop of inherited privilege. The elite build a system to ensure they pass their privilege down across generations, quietly locking everyone else out, all while maintaining the shiny facade of a free market.
So how does this calcification actually happen? First, elites take traditional caste capital, think inherited social networks, prestige, legacy monopolies, and they convert it into modern capital, like highly sought-after university degrees or prestigious tech roles. Once they've done that, they magically claim what we call castiness merit. They tell you their success is purely because of individual talent or objective test scores. And then, the very second a field gets too competitive or democratized, they just pack up and withdraw to newer, unregulated frontiers, taking their monopoly right along with them.
This highlights a really profound point from sociologist Satish Deshpande. He points out that upper caste identity is completely overwritten by modern professional identities. Basically, the elite successfully rebrand their inherited structural dominance as pure intellectual talent. They essentially cash in their traditional advantages like casino chips, converting them into this casteless merit. It makes their privilege look like the natural result of just, working harder or being inherently smarter.
And this creates what sociologists call the unmarked general category. Think of it as a sociological invisibility cloak for the elite. They get to operate in total anonymity as the default norm. They claim to have moved past inherited privilege altogether, operating in a purely merit-based system. But at the exact same time, this dynamic forces the subaltern, the lower classes, to bear the highly visible burden of their identities, especially when they try to mobilize for resources. So the elite become invisible citizens, while the marginalized become hyper-visible subjects.
Now, what's really interesting here is how we see this exact same dynamic being used to hoard wealth and power in modern technology. For centuries, we've been fed this romantic myth of the lone genius, right? The guy sitting under the apple tree, pulling brilliant ideas out of thin air.
But sociologists and cognitive scientists know that innovation is actually driven by combinatorial creativity. It's a shared, cumulative process of rearranging existing human knowledge. Yet the elite heavily push that myth of the sole inventor. Why? So they can legally enclose shared ideas and claim them as their own exclusive, casteless merit.
To put that into perspective and see how it builds completely separate realities, let's look at the recycling economy in Delhi, India. You have two groups doing the exact same work, recycling waste. But the informal sector, which is mostly oppressed castes and Muslims, is totally excluded from institutions. They're forced into manual, door-to-door labor. Meanwhile, the formal sector, run by dominant castes, gets full institutional support, machinery, and lucrative government contracts. It's not just a gap in wealth. It is a rigid, structural boundary that dictates who is even allowed to accumulate wealth in the first place.
And we're seeing this exact kind of structural boundary being erected in our digital world right now. History is absolutely full of battles over infrastructural power. We checked absolute monarchs with the Treaty of Westphalia in 1648, and now we're heading toward a looming crisis in 2026 with the Great Cloud AI enclosure. Centralized tech monopolies are essentially staging a royalist counter-revolution. They're trying to enclose the digital commons, acting like digital monarchs and placing themselves squarely between you and your everyday life.
So how are they building these modern fortresses? Well, a major tool is the patent thicket. This is a dense, completely suffocating web of overlapping intellectual property rights, deliberately designed to block independent creators. Elite patent agents operate as anonymous ghostwriters. Instead of just saying 2 gears, they'll use purposefully vague, mutated legal jargon like a plurality of gears. Why? To capture future concepts that haven't even been invented yet. They're actively engineering the text to build impenetrable legal walls around ideas, literally stalling human progress.
We also see this massive extraction happening in artificial intelligence. Right now, 85% of modern AI computation relies on what we can call the FPU gambler. That's hardware that prioritizes speed by essentially guessing the math rather than using strict, predictable, deterministic logic. And because the machine is fundamentally just guessing, it causes this crazy wood chipper effect. It chops up the shared combinatorial creativity of millions of human artists and writers, permanently destroying the exact path of that data. The elite are using this massive digital blender to extract immense value from the masses while completely obscuring the original human provenance.
And here is the truly terrifying reality of this enclosed system, the moral crumple zone. Think about the front of a car. It's explicitly designed to crush on impact to save the cabin, right? Well, humans are kept in the loop of complex automated systems specifically to absorb the legal and ethical impact when those systems inevitably fail. The massive tech monopolies reap all the automated financial rewards, but everyday people? We're used as human shields to absorb the liability when the algorithm hallucinates or causes real-world harm.
It all comes back to a profound realization by scholar Anupama Rao. She says, capitalist private property regimes do not overcome caste. Custom inflects property itself. This is huge. Modern capitalism doesn't magically erase ancient social hierarchies, and it certainly doesn't create a level playing field. Instead, it absorbs those ancient hierarchies, institutionalizes them, and just rebrands them as modern legal property and merit.
So let's bring this all together. Why does standard economic redistribution, just tweaking the tax brackets, fail so miserably against this system? First, it targets fluid class boundaries, assuming mobility rather than addressing these rigid caste enclosures. Second, a wealth tax simply cannot tax hidden caste capital or exclusive social networks. Third, it leaves massive institutional gatekeeping, like patent thickets and AI monopolies, completely intact. And finally, it totally fails to dismantle that invisible, unmarked category that lets the elite mask their hereditary dominance as pure intellectual merit.
Which leaves us with this final, truly provocative question to ponder. If privilege is locked inside a cultural caste, carefully hidden behind an invisibility cloak of modern merit and algorithmic technology, can standard class warfare ever truly reach it? If we don't start addressing the structural calcification of our society, are we literally just rearranging the deck chairs while the elite safely watch from their fortress? Thanks for joining me for this explainer. Keep questioning the systems around you, and I'll see you next time.